This presentation will be on the Siksika Nation by Brian Hogan and Tara McIvor. The Siksika Nation is one of 3 tribes that makes up the Blackfoot Confederation. The Siksika is also known as the Blackfoot or the Northern Blackfoot.
Siksika Nation is located 87 kilometers southeast of Calgary. It has a land area of 696 square kilometers, making it the second largest Indigenous reserve in Canada. The traditional territory extended from the North Saskatchewan River to the Yellowstone River in southern Montana. The Rocky Mountains form the western border of the territory, while the eastern boundary extended southward from the junction of the North and South Saskatchewan rivers.
The Blackfoot would average about 30 miles per day and doubled the distance when they acquired horses in 1730. They followed the buffalo in the summer to the grasslands and north to the parkland, where the buffalo sheltered in forests in the wintertime.
The Siksika people continually returned to the same sites in the same seasons that provided them with food and shelter. They traveled 500 miles during a yearly cycle to hunt, gather, and renew religious commitments.
The Siksika people followed the buffalo as their lives revolved around the thunder and glory of the buffalo hunt. The bison remained the most important element of their economy, diet, and way of life. The Siksika also known as the Blackfoot, way of life and food sources were altered as the settlers massacred the buffaloes, which affected many different nations. It changed the Great Plains as the wolves, vultures, and the grizzly bear lost their food source, and then they left the prairies, so the grasslands were no longer grazed. The Siksika had to fight with former allies to protect the remaining buffalo, as many nations were starving due to the massacre of the buffalo.
Presently, the Siksika Nation has a population of approximately 7,000 people, with 55% of its population living on the reserve. They are currently in the process of developing a model of self-governance that will define and control the nation's own destiny and remove it from the jurisdiction of the Indian Act. Evidence of their desire for independence can be found in the vast majority of facilities and supports found on the nation. They currently administer traditionally focused schools, have health and wellness facilities, as well as social programs, employment and training, and departments of land management and resource development. Historically, the Blackfoot were taught from infancy and throughout their lifetime how to survive and be in harmony with their environment. A yearly cycle will not only replenish their food and material sources, but also rekindle their mental, physical, and spiritual well-being.
Colonialism's effect. First contact with settlers happened in 1754, but it was in 1849 when the settlers introduced smallpox and measles to the indigenous peoples that resulted in many deaths. Treaty 7 was signed between the Government of Canada and the Blackfoot Confederacy, which includes the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Stoney Nakoda, and the Tsuut'ina Nations. These treaties ceded vast amounts of land in return to create reserve land, give agricultural equipment and livestock, provide annuities, ammunition, gratuities, clothing, and certain rights to hunt and fish. And the treaties were viewed differently by the indigenous peoples and the Europeans. Therefore, it resulted in reserves that indigenous peoples do not own, as the Crown now owns the land and only lets the indigenous people use it for their benefit. Two other significant events that also impacted Siksika and indigenous peoples were the residential schools and the 60s scoop. As a result of both of these injustices, multiple generations have lost language and knowledge and their cultural identity. Many indigenous children are currently overrepresented in the foster system, and connections to culture and traditions have been replaced with problems in wellness and mental health across indigenous communities. Overall, colonialism has led to death, famine, land stolen, assimilation, loss of culture, intergenerational trauma, and loss of self-determination as just some of these lasting effects.
The Siksika refer to themselves as Nisapi, or the real people, because they are partners in the universe with all beings. Chief Crowfoot is considered to be the greatest chief in the history of the Blackfoot Confederacy. He presided over the Confederacy for over 30 years, ensuring his people's needs were always taken care of. His notoriety is believed to be attributed to a battle when he showed up and rallied the Blackfeet to defeat the Cree in a battle they were previously losing. His escapades are legendary and are still told in today's society. Chief Old Sun was a spiritual leader and warrior. He was the head chief of the Northern Siksika during the same time period as Chief Crowfoot. Chief Crowfoot was the chief of the Southern Siksika. At the signing of Treaty 7, Old Sun was instrumental in uniting the Siksika bands and deferred the decision to sign Treaty 7 to Chief Crowfoot.
References.